scared me. I didn't think anyone else was down here. Where are you, you ask? Well, you are in the liminal library, with a never-ending supply of stories and books. I don't think you'll ever find your way out, but you're welcome to try. It's been so long since I last had a guest. Do you mind if I read you a story? I'm glad you don't mind. Today's story is called The Skeleton Key. John was alone. He had been alone for as long as he could remember. It suited him just fine. He had a hard time with people. He felt he could never trust them on the important stuff. They would always let him down. He lived on the edge of a small town with a swamp next to it. He would spend his days in the swamp exploring and relaxing. One day, he stumbled on something peculiar. He saw a fairy struggling in a spider's web. The more it fought, the tighter the web got, and John could see a big spider racing to find its newly caught prey. Without much of a thought, and with more bravery than John had ever showed in his life, he raced in and plucked the still struggling fairy from the web. After a lot of wiggling, the fairy burst from the remnants of the web and flew out of John's hand with a burst. It turned back to thank its rescuer. "Thank you for saving me," it said, still out of breath. "Here's a thank you gift." It seemingly out of nowhere pulled out a strange little bar, about the size of it, with tons of jagged pieces going every direction, and dropped it into his hand. "This is a magic key," it said. "It can open any door." John stared at the key in his hand, not really knowing what to say. "Be careful with that. It's powerful, but if it's used for evil, it'll quickly be your undoing." John watched the fairy fly away in a trail of blue and thought about how to use it right. Years later, John was living a comfortable life as a locksmith, the best the world had ever seen. Whenever a lock needed to be opened, he could open it for his clients in a matter of seconds. Words of his praise spread quickly to neighboring towns. It found its way to a young explorer named Mark, who knew exactly how to use it. One morning, John awoke to a knock at his door. At the door was Mark. Mark excitedly told John who he was and about a proposition to make a lot of money. "I know a crypt in an old cemetery that's hundreds of years old that can only be accessed with a small key. It has been lost many years ago, back when people were still buried with gold and valuables. We can split the profits." "I don't know," said John. "Wouldn't that be disturbing the dead?" No, said Mark reassuringly. We're finding artifacts that would go great in a museum. The people should see these works of art. Think of what we could learn from them." John finally relented and told Mark he would go with him. Mark seemed trustworthy, and he felt that the knowledge kept in the crypt would be worthwhile. They decided it'd be the best to go at night, so there'd be a lot less questions. When night came, they decided to go. John noticed how quiet the cemetery was. The only sound that could be heard was their footsteps as they quickly and quietly approached the crypt. "There's the keyhole," said Mark, pointing at the base of the crypt. It didn't look like any keyhole John had ever seen. Nevertheless, John got to work, and within 3 seconds, there was a click and the door slid open mechanically. John, without much of a thought, walked into the dark, inviting tomb with Mark following after. There were bones everywhere, and he could see many crumpled skeletons against the sides of the small hall that stood before them. Many were holding weapons that must have been hundreds of years old. They stood in silent amazement at what they discovered. "We're gonna be rich," Mark said under his breath. John took a step forward. The stone gave way slightly as he stepped. Suddenly, they heard a mechanical scraping sound, and instantly recognized it as the door closing behind them. Mark and John ran as fast as they could back to the entrance. Mark managed to make it out in the last second before the door closed, leaving John in total darkness. John screamed for help, but he couldn't hear Mark. He decided that Mark must have gone to for help. He wouldn't leave him alone in the crypt, right? He waited by the entrance for what seemed like hours, but nobody came. He looked for a keyhole, but the door didn't have one inside. Eventually, John lost hope. John was alone. He had been for quite some time. Normally he'd be okay with this, but he knew this is where he would stay. His trust had been misplaced. No one came to look for him. The end. Now, that was quite a story, my listeners. Hopefully you were able to learn something from this story. Don't go sticking your head in places they don't belong. That might be how you ended up here. But what about John? No one ever came for him. His skin rotted away, leaving only a skeleton clutching a key. This reminds me of another story where a man woke up and left his skeleton in his bed. Oh, I guess you're busy. Maybe join us next week for another chilling tale. Good night, and don't let the spiders bite. This has been Tales of the Liminal Library.